Okay, I'm back with Graeme, and I'm going to talk about the skills and mindset that an online facilitator should have when doing online facilitation. So Graeme, well, that's the question that I was going to have. What is the mindset and skill that I should carry if I'm going as an online facilitator?
The key thing really is that your job as a facilitator is to do that. It's to facilitate. It's not necessarily to lecture. So, and what I mean by that is you will quite often get students who come to the course with a mindset that, hey, I've got to pass these assessments. That's their goal. I've got to get to the end and earn the certificate, and that's what they want to achieve. And that's valid, that's fine, that may be what the student wants to achieve. But as an instructor, as a facilitator, I actually want the student to learn. I don't necessarily just want them to pass all the assessments. Right. So one of the balances you have to strike, and I think that this kind of plays to the mindset of a facilitator, is yes, you want to help the student. You don't want them to hit a brick wall and stop and give up. But you don't want to just give the whole thing away. So sometimes when you're answering a question, you won't directly tell the student, hey, you got stuck in this lab, click this, and you're done. Right. Sometimes your answer will be, well, hey, think about what you did in the previous step. Think about what you're trying to achieve. And just encouraging the student to take a little bit of time to step back, think about what they're trying to achieve, and actually learn from the process. So one of the skills that I think you have to have is, like I said previously, you need to know the content, you need to know the labs, you need to know if the lab is perhaps broken. You know, maybe the students found a bug in the lab and it just doesn't work, in which case you've got to know that and tell them what the workaround is or get it fixed. But assuming the lab does work, then your answer to the student shouldn't just be, hey, do this, and you'll be done. The answer should be, step back, think about this, I'll follow up after 24 hours or whatever, but give them the space to solve the problem for themselves rather than to try and just immediately solve all their problems for them. They'll learn more in the long run. They may initially, bristle at that a little bit, but it's a better learning experience from them, from their perspective, rather than just being told and just spoon-fed every step.
Well, so that's a great point. I think what I heard there also is to anchoring around the thought of the learning for the students is much more. There are other skills that you mentioned in the previous videos as well, but just if you have that mindset of my job is this, then it becomes easier for students to do that. And I think some of the examples of the lab example that you're going, almost saying I won't give you the steps, but if you really are getting stuck, I can unstuck you by giving you a path saying, maybe here's an approach, high-level approach. I'm not giving the steps. Yeah. Think about it in this manner. Maybe sometimes that is relevant as well. Yeah, okay, that's great. So again, now from this, I want to also get some insights into examples that you faced. Give me something specific saying, this course I did this and I learned this. I think that'll be a great nugget for the learners here.
I mean, certainly in the courses that we have a data science curriculum that has, I think, 10 courses end to end. So students come into the very first course and they're new to it. They're really struggling to understand fundamental things. But then later on in the series, they're building on things they've learned. So two examples I would give you. At the intro course at the very beginning, I've had students who have struggled to perhaps use a feature in Excel. So the first thing is to figure out, well, what version of Excel are you using? Does it have that feature? And if it does, rather than tell the student, hey, here's how you create a pivot chart, let's say, for example, perhaps just pointing them to the documentation. Perhaps just saying, hey, we saw an example of this, you saw a demo of this in the lecture. Here's a link to the documentation online that it supports this particular feature in Excel. So rather than me tell you click by click what to do, why don't you go and do what you would have to do in the real world? Go and actually look at the documentation, figure it out. And it does two things. One, it helps unstick the student and makes them think about what they're doing. But the other thing it does is it helps them adopt that real world practice. What am I going to do when I'm not in a classroom? What am I going to do when this isn't a course, it's real life? Well, that's what you would have to do. You would have to go and research. So part of it is helping students to develop that. The other example that I've come across quite a few times in this data science curriculum is I'll get students at a later on course in the curriculum get stuck on something that they learned in a previous course. Okay. And if I know that they're participating in that program, I know they've gone through the entire curriculum, that's a great opportunity to say, well, hey, do you remember you did this lab in the third course.
Right.
Go back and revisit that, because this is the same thing. It might be different data you're working with, but it's the same principle you're trying to approach. And sometimes that helps students. And again, that's something from real life. Sometimes you'll be trying to do a task and you think, hey, I've done something similar to this before. What did I do then? Right. And build on that. So a lot of it is about helping students find the answers for themselves and develop the coping mechanisms that they'll need when they're not in a kind of supported course environment.
Right. Yeah, and it helps reinforce the learning too, in saying, okay, you point them in this direction. And that brings to one more insight in terms of skills side, which you had mentioned earlier, which is know your curriculum. For you to be able to say, hey, go back to third course, you got to know your content matter pretty deeply.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Graeme, and we'll come back in the next video then.